this next discussion with our panel is around decarbonisation and the skills gap. What I will do is I'll just we'll start at the end with yourselves, Chris, and if you could just introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, and we'll go along the lines one after another. Thanks, gentlemen.
Okay, so I'm Chris Cooke. I'm the directly elected mayor of Middlesbrough.
I'm Mark Wilkins, Technology and Trading Director for Vaillant UK.
I'm Stuart Dawley. I'm a Professor of Economic Geography at Newcastle University.
I'm Chris McDonald. I think I'm billed on the agenda as the Chief Executive of the Materials Processing Institute, but I'm not. As of 10 days ago, I stepped down and I'm acting as a consultant now, because I'm also the Labour Party parliamentary candidate for Stockton North. You might have heard of Stockton, was in the news a bit over the course of the last 24 hours. And so I'm the Labour Parliamentary candidate for Stockton North.
Great, fantastic. So we have had some we have some questions submitted, but I will at some point go open the floor up to some questions as well. So don't worry, you'll get hopefully an opportunity to ask the panel some questions. So following on nicely from the last session, it was mentioned around the skills gap and how we plug that local labour force requirement. So Chris, if I can ask you, what is the future of the UK steel industry and how are we going to support jobs with that and the transition to net zero?
That's me as Chris rather than Chris.
Chris McDonald, sorry.
I thought it must be. Steel's one of my specialist subjects.
Yeah.
So I've worked in the steel industry for the last 20 years. And I think we've got some really exciting opportunity in the steel industry. And steel is synonymous with the Teesside area. We've got a really great steel skills base here. But more than that, we've got all of the right conditions for a steel industry as well. We've got great transport links, open access to land and energy infrastructure, and all of the things that the steel industry is going to need in the future, particularly access to technology such as carbon capture and storage or hydrogen, great digital technologies as well. They're all emerging sectors in Teesside. So the sort of requirements are there for our region to do really well from steel. And if we look at what's happening in the steel industry globally, we're seeing billions of pounds being invested in this sector in Europe, where our major competitors are, in North America, and of course in the Far East as well. The one thing we're not seeing is that investment in the UK. And there's a reason for that. Actually, there are a couple of reasons. So I've worked with some CEOs of major international steel companies who see the UK as a great market opportunity. They see our steel industry as undersized and to some extent underdeveloped. But they haven't been able to make the numbers work here. And there's a couple of reasons for that. So one is we fundamentally have uncompetitive energy prices for industry in the UK. Some of our heavy industry is paying up to double the cost of energy that you would pay if you were located in Germany or France or other European countries. The reason for that is largely policy costs. So essentially that's a policy decision. And then the other side of that is where the steel industry is investing its billions of pounds globally. That's by co-investment with national governments. And we have seen some sign that might start to happen in the UK as well, with the potential for a deal with Tata Steel and British Steel. But that's really quite small beer compared with what we're seeing with the major steel players in Europe. So we lack those two things. And if we had those two things, we would unlock great investment in the steel industry in the UK. So just for comparison, the UK steel industry is about the same size as the Belgian steel industry. It's a little bit smaller actually. And Belgium only has 15% of the population of the UK. So we could make great inroads into providing really good jobs and providing national security infrastructure in the UK just by addressing those two issues.
That's really interesting. Yeah, thank you for that. Really interesting. So if we look again at helping because young people came up earlier as well. So how we're helping young people engage and what their ambition is for them in the sector for decarbonisation in the region. Chris, how are we helping young people and what's being done? Chris Cooke at the end, sorry.
So I think this is probably one of the most difficult aspects, and I think some of it does link back actually to the steel industry. I think what we've seen over the years is as that industry has started to decline and people have seen the loss of some of those sites, a lot of the young people sort of now may believe that there's nothing out there, and I think that's probably one of the biggest false economies that exists. There's plenty out there, but I think we just need to readdress what there is for them. One of the biggest things that we can do is to really start to strategize what areas and towns do well, what current industries they have, and what we can do to grow a workforce there. One of the big mistakes that we can make is by not having a clear strategy for each of the areas. What we need to make sure that we do is we get those pipelines in place now so that they're ready for years to come. We need to make sure that in places like Middlesbrough, where we have a thriving digital sector, we make some of the games that are played worldwide. For Sony, it's a major place for innovation, but that's not something that a child in Middlesbrough will tell you is an option for them as a career. And the reason for that is because we don't shout about it enough. So the main thing that we can do is to build on that aspiration, make sure that people know what's out there, but also work with places like the Tees Valley and make sure that we build those strategies, those inward investment strategies that have workforce as a central theme throughout.
Okay, great stuff. And I spoke to you earlier briefly about this, Mark, about what your company's doing specifically as Vaillant Group around skills and the skills gap. What are you doing for the sector?
Okay, to set a little bit of context, Vaillant are a manufacturer of heat pumps. You may know as traditional gas boilers, other low carbon home heating solutions. We're actively developing hydrogen solutions as well for home heating should that move forward. We're based down in Derby in the East Midlands where the factory is, and we have one set of skills challenges in that area. At the moment we don't have a combined authority in Derby, but that's coming. So part of my visit here is to learn what's going on and how that can then be transferred. But our product is used in homes across the length and breadth of the country. And decarbonising the home, decarbonising the built environment is central, and it's possibly the biggest challenge that we face within the decarbonisation of the UK. So we have to work with the regions, we have to work with the combined authorities and the sort of even the devolved governments to look at the local skills needs. They will be dependent a little bit on the types of properties and the area that you're in. The climate changes from north to south, east to west, so we have to consider that with the solutions that we put forward. So it's very much a local requirement for the skills that will help to decarbonise the home. We're reaching out to colleges, to universities, to work in the local area to help them build the skills bases that are needed to target the challenges in this area. We have local training centres that we run, but as I say, equally we work with local colleges. We help to train the lecturers on the newer technologies that come through. Again, that's fairly fundamental. We can't just push technology into the market. We have to support those that are teaching the next generation, the next group of talent coming through.
Okay, brilliant. And just to elaborate more on obviously what you guys do. So how do we decarbonise the home heating a bit more, and how will this affect the economy, and how will the economy have to make a change to make it possible? So I'll rephrase that. How will the economy have to change in order to decarbonise our homes' heating systems?
Decarbonising the home will start with fabric. So if we improve the fabric of the buildings, we start to use less energy. It helps to support the energy security discussion. We have some of the oldest and leakiest homes in the UK, so we have to address that side of things. We have to look at the heating systems that we're using and how we use heat and hot water and energy in the UK. We have to educate the consumer. We have to help them understand how they use the heating system in the UK. At the moment, people generally tend to turn their boiler on for 2 periods a day, morning and night, as high as it will go, belt the heat into the property, and then let it all cool down. Moving forward, as we go to technologies like heat pumps, it's more of a low and slow trickle into the building. You need to move away from heat to the thought of comfort. Am I comfortable? So we start to use the systems in a different way. Jake spoke earlier on of the 94% transferable skills. And skills passports, I think, are again, fundamental in our world, because there's a lot of crossover between traditional gas-based heating systems, oil or LPG if you're off-grid, and the new low-carbon heat pump solutions that are coming through. Probably with a heat pump, there's more electrical work that goes into it, but there's a lot of transferable skills. So it's just lifting the skills level and the knowledge level of the installer to be able to put that system into the property, to understand how it will interact with the building, how the customer will interact with it, to get what they need, which ultimately is comfort.
Yeah, My sort of a leading on question, sorry, this is pointing at you, but any of the gentlemen jump in. But how do we make that affordable for every household? How is that going to be possible to make that affordable for every household?
We're in the early stages of the transition to heat pumps and the lower carbon technologies. And at the moment, there is a cost premium. There is more in a heat pump than a traditional gas boiler. A gas boiler weighs in at something like 25 kilos. A heat pump, about 100 kilos. There's more material inside. So there will be a cost balance. There will be a benefit of scale that comes through, but it won't levelise the cost. We have to look at the energy price balance. So at the moment, we put a lot of social levies onto electricity. We have to look at that and rebalance that to make a reason to buy for the consumer and to switch towards a more beneficial cost base for the electric side of things. That in turn, with less energy, will help to start funding through savings some of the outward cost. We have various funding mechanisms at the moment, depending whether it's social housing or private one-off, which are accessible up to £7,500 towards a heat pump installation, which helps, and that really does to bring the price down. So it's a mix, I think, of policy, of regulation, of having the local skills in the area, because at the moment it is very difficult to find a heat pump installer. So as we widen that base, then market forces come in and the install cost comes down. And also pump priming the market in the early days with grant funding. Heat pumps are not new technology, but they are new to the UK. And there's a lot of people have a lot of learning to do on the technology before it will become widespread.
We keep coming back to skills and skills gaps, and everyone keeps mentioning it, and it was mentioned briefly in the previous panel. And I'm going to probably regret mentioning this, but the 2,000 jobs that were announced to be lost in the steel industry a little bit further down on the East Coast. What do you feel that could be done to stop losing jobs to the sector, and why, when we're crying out for skilled workforces, are people being laid off from such things? Open to the floor to any gentleman. I don't know if you want to take this.
I think one of the key sort of elements to that, and my family many years ago moved from York here to pursue ICI and British Steel, and those are two key sort of sectors that they went into really. One of the key things with all of it though, it was those employers were more than just employers. It was a sort of a family, and it was I still remember as a child we went to the pantomime because British Steel sort of took us as a family. There was the galas, there was all those extra elements where the business became so much more than what it was. So their retention was so high, their loyalty was so high, and I think that's one of the factors that means it's still constantly mentioned, because there was that reliance on it, and there was that warmth towards it that you don't see in other businesses. And I think it's a model that other people can adopt, of taking that ownership of your employees, of looking at them as more than just the people who clock in and clock out every day. And that's how you get the true retention, but it's how you get that real sense of loyalty to the sector as well.
Okay.
I think the core of the question is how we achieve a transition, or a just transition in fact. So you mentioned the steel industry specifically, and ultimately, as the steel industry decarbonises, and it's not just about steel, it's other industries like oil and gas as well, jobs will be lost in those sectors. And the jobs will be lost because the industries are not only going green, they're going smart at the same time as well. So the most productive steel mill in the world is in the USA. It makes the same amount of steel as our biggest plant in South Wales. It makes the same qualities of steel as our biggest plant in South Wales. And it does it with 20% of the workforce. Now, unless we open up to the fact that this is the reality of the latest sort of digital processing in heavy industry, then we will tie ourselves to plant and equipment that will be globally inefficient, and those people will lose their jobs anyway. So what we need to do is invest, embrace the new technology, and accept that that gives us an opportunity where highly skilled people from these industries are freed up to go into the growth industries that we want to see in the future. Small modular reactors, offshore wind, hydrogen, carbon capture and storage. All of these industries will require skilled workers, and those workers can come from oil and gas and steel and petrochemicals and these other industries that will need to reduce their workforce in order to increase their productivity. So for me, the just transition, it's about caring for workforces and communities, as you've just mentioned, Chris, and the communities in Scunthorpe and South Wales are part of that as well. But it's also the only way that as a country, as a UK, we can capture the economic opportunity of these new industries too.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Stuart, if it can come to you, what are the unique advantages for Teesside? And what lessons do you think could be learned by the rest of the East Coast?
With relation to
decarbonisation?
Well, I think you have to situate it within the broader UK perspective. So I think the UK needs to take some credit for the way it's approached carbon capture and storage. From 2019 onwards, the sort of focus on clean growth and then looking towards industrial decarbonisation around clusters, I think that has had many successes. So I think the government has got regions to think about clusters, and you have to think about clusters when you're thinking about decarbonisation because it's not one isolated sector. It connects different process industries, emitters, and then potentially downstream there's the use of hydrogen as a new feedstock into the industry. So I think that cluster approach that the government encouraged was really important. I think the government's cluster sequencing was also successful in mitigating the risk of the chicken and the egg. Do you put transport and storage in first, or do you get your emitters first, that sort of thing? And I think with track 1 and track 2, the UK has got some international profile in scale and scope on carbon capture and storage now. So within that national picture, why Teesside has been successful in track 1, I think there's a long history of thinking about carbon capture and storage, going back to the Teesside Collective, the work of NEPIC, thinking as a cluster, thinking of the challenges the process industries were facing and how you dealt with that. That's maybe got a longer history here than it has in other regions. I think that's quite important. The infrastructure, the scale of the infrastructure, that could be adapted. The Humber is the same, but I think Teesside has managed to get that sort of investment. And then I think there's a political side that you can't overlook. Combined authority, high profile mayor, other things as well, I guess, which have been really important. But I think, I could imagine if, and there might be some people in here who are involved in the track 1 phase 2 decisions, I think you would have probably quite a lot of confidence in Teesside being able to deliver on some of the projects because of the cluster thinking, the long history, some unique elements of the infrastructure, the pipes, that sort of thing. It was here. So I think that Teesside has maybe set an example now. The challenge for Teesside is to make the most out of this, to maximise, not just thinking about track 1 phase 2, but what happens beyond that. How do you bring other emitters into it? How do you look towards developing more sort of clustering with other elements? What happens to those who weren't successful in track 1 phase 2? How do you keep them going? And I know the government will be delivering a CCS vision before the end of the year, and I think it's important that Teesside are on the front foot with that, as opposed to thinking we were successful in that first round and it's somebody else's turn. I think there's the opportunities to keep pushing on with that.
I think, and that leads nicely, I think, Chris, at the end. How do Darlington, the region, make sure that they are continually at the front of that government's vision, in your opinion?
I think part of it goes back to the sort of the strategic plan that you need for each area to make sure that we are setting out what the offer is. So we have a huge advantage by having the university right on the doorsteps. And one of the things that the university is really, really good at is incubating both workforce and businesses so that we are primed and ready to make sure that we can sort of upscale for different types of businesses, but also for different types of sectors. One of the most advantageous things that we have currently is that really adaptable workforce. So we do have a really high skilled workforce which is currently spread across those different sectors. But this interchangeable skills is really, really high. And I think we need to do more to sell that. But I think it is something that the government is starting to wake up to, that the North East is about more than just a decline in the steel industry. We have so much more to offer and they need to take advantage of it.
Okay, brilliant. I'd really like to bring the audience in because you had some great questions earlier. So if anyone wants to put their hand up, they have a question around for the panel. The microphone will come round. If you have a question for a specific person on the panel, please let them know. If not,
Hi, Doug Bacon, Director of Asset at 13 Group. So we manage around 30,000 homes in the Teesside area, and really interested to hear and see Mark on the panel around. We need to effectively install maybe 20,000 of Mark's heat pumps by 2050. And I guess the question for the panel is there a risk in a double skills drain from Teesside? So from a housing association perspective, organisations up the north east coast, Gen 2 in Sunderland, Benicia up in Blythe area, we're really concerned that the North East, rightly so, focus on industry side of net zero, green gas, hydrogen, batteries. We already lose skills to the rest of the country when it comes for gas engineers and electricians. So actually the focus, again, rightly so, on those big, good tech skill jobs that are going to come out of the green economy potentially creates us a double problem when it comes to installing air source heat pumps for the citizens of Teesside. And it's just that kind of interested in panel's view.
Well, so I'm familiar with a lot of your properties, and one advantage you do have is many of your properties are slightly newer or slightly more modern than some of the leaky homes that were mentioned earlier. My brother's recently moved into an Edwardian semi-detached house in Coventry, and I don't know what he's going to do to heat it. But look, I think I might just answer this in a slightly different way, which is just to say I'm not entirely convinced, speaking as an engineer, I am not entirely convinced that heat pumps are the complete or even the majority solution for home heating in the UK. And I know, because I work in industry, that the best thing we can do with hydrogen is use it to decarbonise industry. That's the number one thing. I also know that it is less efficient, thermodynamically speaking, so do remember some thermodynamics, to use hydrogen to heat a home than to use electricity. However, I am aware of the condition of the UK housing and how difficult it will be to deploy heat pumps. I think, we're all probably incredibly pleased by the reliability of our gas network and how we share the costs of that infrastructure. And if we start moving huge numbers of houses off the gas network onto electricity, then all of the costs of that network will then fall onto everybody else to a point that the economic model of gas in the UK will just stop working. I am concerned about that. And I'm also concerned about the fact that currently only 10% of our energy demand comes from electricity, and I haven't seen any plans to create a tenfold increase in electricity generation and distribution in the UK. So I think we need to look at this not just from an academic viewpoint, which I slightly fear is where we have been, and move instead into the world of engineering, practical implementation. All right, there might be a theoretically best solution, but what will actually work in the real world? So I just wanted to make a shout out for hydrogen and home heating and just leave you with one final thought. So people are fond of telling me, and it's true, that heat pumps have made great strides in heating homes in Scandinavia, and that the Scandinavians are leading in this, and it's quite cold in Scandinavia, and so they do very well. And I know it's cold in Scandinavia because I've worked in Sweden and I've worked in Finland. But the other thing is, not only are heat pumps prevalent there, but those countries are also the single biggest users of wood for home heating per capita in Europe as well. And one thing I observed when I was working in Sweden and Finland is there aren't many people and there are a lot of trees. And the same is not true in the UK. So the true solution for heat pumps is probably also installing wood-burning stoves alongside that. I don't think that's a great environmental solution or sustainable solution, so I think we need to look more broadly.
Interesting. Mark, did you want to come in on this?
I'll take the order for 20,000 heat pumps later on. But Chris, you're right, heat pumps are not the only solution. And for me, this is actually quite a first. I'm normally an advocate for sort of hydrogen in the consideration, and I normally have the heat pump lobby throw back at me the other way. So the truth is there's going to be a mix of technologies that are needed to heat the diverse housing stock that we have in the UK. There's an opportunity for hydrogen. What we need is a very clear and very timely decision on hydrogen-ready equipment into properties and the strategic decision of hydrogen. At the moment, we're pending the decision on hydrogen-ready boilers, and we're told by 2026, now in 2026, we will have the strategic decision as to whether we use hydrogen for home heating. That's holding up all sorts of development of technologies and the preparation for moving things forward. So I support hydrogen, but we need to get moving forward and make clear decisions, policy decisions that it's the right way to go. Hydrogen in itself won't be right for every property. Piping it to the extremes of the country would be very, very challenging. As you said, Chris, we've got a severe challenge with the electricity infrastructure in the UK. Producing it, I think we can transmit it around the country, but when it comes to local distribution, from transformer, substation to the property, again, challenges come up. The answer will be a little bit of heat pumps, a bit of hydrogen, a bit of heat network. So it's across the technologies, and any form of technology that's not yet invented, I think, will also play a role. There are transferable skills between those technologies. It's home heating. Again, we come back to the skills passport suggestion, an idea, and we have to understand that. You're right, Chris. Academic discussion has been taken about heating homes with heat pumps, but we've also had numbers plucked out of the air. 600,000 heat pumps by 2028 will be installed from the cloud. That will take 40,000 full-time installers to do that. We have changed business models, but we will still have the designers that we need. We still need to get the installers. So, yeah, there are skills drain issues. But everything you mentioned, electrician, plumbing, heating, we have two problems at the moment. One is a skills shortage, and the other is a labour shortage. Those trades are categorised by 45, 50 plus individuals who aren't thinking of decarbonising, they're thinking of retiring. And one of the anecdotal pieces of information we had from the 20th of September when Prime Minister made his announcements, pushing the kicking the can down the road to 2035 for the phase out of gas and off-grid boilers has made a lot of people think whether they really want to train for heat pumps and the newer technologies already. So we've pushed a problem further down the road.
Yeah. Can I just, Chris, you seem eager to jump in here as well quickly.
I'll be really quick. So there's two main questions that I think anyone will ask if there's any sort of new technology to be implemented, and it's how much will it cost, and if it breaks, can someone fix it? And anecdotally, I was actually in one of the larger 13 establishments where they look after families that have found themselves homeless, and one of the key aspects in one of the flats was actually they'd had heat source pumps installed, but I was told don't go too near it because if it breaks we don't know how quickly we'll get someone out to fix it. And I just thought that was quite telling really of the worries that people have around these sort of newer technologies. So if things are going to be implemented, there needs to be robust costings and there needs to be that robust process for how you get something fixed, which involves a skills workforce, in order to do so.
Again, to pick up on that, with the 20,000 order I'm taking, I'll guarantee next day it comes down to skills. We've got a workforce, a service technician workforce that will support and pick up projects when they go, if the product goes wrong, when it goes wrong. So it's early days with the technology in this country. People are learning. And it comes back to making sure that we've got the supply chain of talent coming in, that we are upskilling those that are working in home heating at the moment. We probably need to stop thinking gas and heat pump and think low carbon installer, low carbon technician. Today we talk about siloed apprenticeships, plumbing, heating, electrician. We need to forget that and look at a multifaceted technician of the future, somebody that has a wider breadth of skills across the built environment. And probably more importantly is understanding how all of this works in the building physics. Because we're seeing a lot of issues at the moment with damp and mould in properties, but we're also telling people not to heat rooms that you use. Turn the heating off in that room. All that's doing is creating a thermal bridge and almost encouraging damp and mould in those rooms. You're better, again, to leave it on low, leave the doors open, just let the heat circulate around the house. It's better for health and it's better for the building fabric. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Okay, great, thank you. I think there was someone else who had their hand up with a question.
Hello, Chris Clayton. I'm the CEO of JTL. We are the largest provider of both electricians and plumbers for apprentices in England. But I suppose my question for the panel is, what is a green job and is it a helpful distinction?
That's a lovely question. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have a go at that. I think that's quite an interesting question in terms of, especially when you're trying to aspire youngsters to identify what it is. I mean, what you would say a green job isn't oil and gas and steel, but it probably is in some respects. It's a greening job. I mean, with the transition, it's not a binary. You don't click a switch and suddenly you go from carbon intensive to low carbon intensive. in Teesside, carbon capture and storage by its own definition will be sustaining jobs in the process industries, as there always have been. So I think that what is a green job is quite an important thing to define, both in terms of getting your labour market intelligence to actually work out what skills it is and who's in the conversation, who do you talk to, because you might think that sector's not really as relevant, but there might be. But also I think secondly, for people to understand where the future is in terms of employment, younger people, we need to kind of get that message to them. Net zero, what does that mean? Do they know what sort of jobs that looks like in the past in this region? And I think when we talk about skills in this region, and I think the region a little bit more broadly than just a combined authority, we should also see what we have done well in the past when we've got new industries. We started an automotive industry here, and it's one of the most productive in Europe. We did have a semiconductor industry, which we started and got going from scratch. And it's kind of learning some of those lessons of what we did well, what worked then, and often not having to start from scratch. But I think what I did read beforehand was the local skills improvement plan, which the Chamber held the pen for. And I think that was a really good document. And I also thought it was quite good in terms of thinking about skill needs for green, but then it bundled together green industries, net zero, and decarbonisation. And so that's quite a bundle of jobs in industries coming together. And you've got to get everybody into that sort of conversation. But I thought it was quite useful, that document, in, for example, the ramp up, you can have a big demand for construction. And then after that, you've got the operations of running these sorts of plants as well. And I think it's that sort of level of detail that's needed, but what defines the job is probably a good point to start.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, of course.
Does it matter that it's a green job? Surely it's important that it's a great job. We've got a decarbonised target, a legally binding target in 2050, net zero. So decarbonisation, green skills that are with us. We need jobs that are good, that are well paid, that have longevity, that contribute towards the decarbonisation, and more importantly, that appeal to the young people coming through. They're very different to most of us sitting in this room today in their outlook. We've just taken on 10 low carbon apprentices, and in that process, talking to them about decarbonisation, net zero, saving the environment, all the climate issues, connectivity and smart homes, that ticks every box, and it really animates young people. So I think it's more about great jobs than it is about defining a green job.
Just to lead on from that, I did it earlier, and yourselves in the panel, we keep referring back to young people and skills gaps, but it was mentioned earlier previously with Jake about the transition of skills from older people, with people living longer, cost of living, people now working longer, people coming back out of retirement to afford for the cost of living. So what about the people that want to then reskill? I feel like sometimes they're perhaps overlooked.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. So I'm talking about this a fair bit, really. So I think lifelong learning and reskilling for new careers is really important. I'm reskilling for a new career right now, actually. You're helping me with it. And I think that we have to recognise that, I alluded to digital technologies earlier, that the advanced pace of technology that we're living through now, it is a new industrial revolution, means that there will be new jobs appearing all the time. People who are entering the workforce can expect to have to retrain, 2, maybe 3 times in their career into jobs that didn't exist previously. Everyone in this room could have the opportunity to do that, and it certainly is an opportunity. And that's a big difference from where we were a couple of decades ago. So it is really important that we focus on providing those opportunities for young people, that we provide apprenticeships and training opportunities, but that we also recognise that people more advanced in their career, when a job role comes to an end, can have the opportunity to retrain, reskill, have a great job, have that kind of sense of purpose, and also add some value as well.
There's a mindset change, I think, from where we are today and job for life to the lifelong learning, continual professional development, continual training, almost reinvention of yourself in that in your career, throughout your career.
Yeah.
The other key part to it all is housing. So one of the things that every authority needs to really look at is what in 2040 and beyond what will the makeup of the town and place look like? So in Middlesbrough, if we don't do something to increase the amount of houses that we have, if we don't do something to change the type of housing that we have, by 2040 we will lose 5,000 people from the working age category and gain almost the same amount in that more elderly category. And that is an effect of the fact that people are living longer and people are living healthier. But we need to make sure that we get the housing right so that we are able to keep and retain more people so that they can get the jobs where they need to.
Just going back slightly, the use of AI technology is becoming more forefront and assisting people with their jobs. You mentioned this earlier in the steel industry in America. How do we make sure that our more senior people are also up to date with AI technology? Because I know my mum and dad barely are able to use a mobile phone, and how they're not left behind so that they're also skilled and trained. And how do we create a blended learning force? I would guess the question is.
Which I'd never used, but now I'm going to. So one of the key parts to this all is, I think what we need to almost stop doing is thinking of AI as something that sits alone in a silo, whereas actually it sits underneath technologies and supports it. Very, very basic things like something as simple as autocorrect, and the improvements that we've seen in that is actually AI. It's that bit of intelligence that works a bit harder. What we need to get better at is making sure that people don't see AI as being separate, but actually they just see a better working system, a system that thinks more cleverly, does more of the work for them, and enables them to do their job better. Once we do that, I think people will get less scared about it's some sort of Terminator that's going to come and take over, and actually just see it as something that will make their lives more efficient. But that is going to be such a hard thing to break because we have built up this stigma that is some scary technology.
Yes, good point. Was there one more hand? Lady down the front. Take the last question. I think just got time for one more. Thank you.
So my skill is regarding on skills and transferable skills. So I'm co-founder of Notrack. We're a video games company in Middlesbrough, and we take in interns very, very often from both Teesside University and Middlesbrough College. And we've noticed that every single time that, being Middlesbrough College, for example, our youngest, that they come to our studio and they suddenly realize that we're not just doing games, we're as well offering work for hire for a variety of businesses, creating as well virtual realities and simulations for trainings. And the skills that they're developing in video games are actually transferable for that. And we always have a phase with them where they suddenly their eyes open up to the possibilities of, I don't have to just stick to video games, I can actually do more, and there's more out there. If this path doesn't work for me, I can go somewhere else. How can we make this become a realization as early as possible? Because this is happening both in university, even after university, and there's so many people with skills out there that are probably going into unemployment where they could just move into another industry and still use the exact same set of skills.
Okay, great. Well, gents, we're down to our last few minutes, so we'll have to keep your answers short and sharp, please.
It's not just your industry that faces that. We have started to go into primary schools, we've started to go into secondary schools to talk about our industry, and we're starting to talk to people in what we call adjacent industries where we think they've got the skill sets that can come across to our world, and with some training can work in the built environment of decarbonisation.
I was just going to say, I agree with you. I think gaming is a great gateway into this, and it sounds to me like you're doing a great job. So I think what you're doing is brilliant. You're bringing people in, you're the gateway to that, you're exposing them to other opportunities, and then they can see that they could apply those skills in industry or in services or in lots of other places. I think the armed forces have run a campaign recently where they've absolutely made that explicitly clear. Maybe my own industry could learn from that, but it sounds to me like you're doing a great job doing it.
Yeah, we've already done simulations for other types of, like firefighters, forklifts and stuff like that. So we know the skills are transferable even from those kind of elements.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to the previous panel, what Peter and Jake were saying, and especially what Peter said, which was a really good point, that it's down to industry. So it is down to us to engage with schools, and it is down to us to engage as businesses. And as businesses work together and collaborate more and have one voice, if we're all saying the same thing to the same people at the same time, then obviously it's going to be hold much more weight than if we go and try and all do it our own way and all do it individually. So I think there's probably a nice note to end on as well. I'm not going to stand between anyone and their coffee, but can we all give the panel a round of applause, and thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you.